World Mental Health Day, which is a chance for everyone around the globe, really, to talk about it. And lots of people are. One of the big focuses this year is on young people. Tom is spending the morning with teenagers at a secondary school. Tom, you're in Rushden, aren't you?
Yeah, Rushden Academy, Annabelle. And you're right, growing up as a young person is always going to be a challenge, isn't it? Finding your place in the world, keeping up with your peers, all of the pressure of social media. Schools have historically taught people academically, but there's a growing recognition that they also have to do all of the wellbeing stuff as well. So here at Rushden Academy, they have lessons on wellbeing. You can also get counselling and support. And that leads me to where I'm standing, which is in a therapy room, essentially. There's a dream catcher hanging in the window, some flowers, soft toys on shelves, calming artwork. And this is where Jo Holmes, who is wellbeing lead and school counsellor at Rushden Academy, this is one of the places that you try to help some of the pupils, Jo.
Yeah, welcome to Rushden Academy, and today's an important day for us as World Mental Health Day, and we're having a campaign all week to look at reducing stigma. So one of the things that students and staff alike are doing is wearing yellow to show support for people that are struggling with their mental health and wellbeing generally. And we've got a series of assemblies and a yellow cake sale, so we'll be raising money for young minds and looking at developing young ambassadors, really, as part of our launch for World Mental Health Day.
What are the issues that you see young people with in this school at the moment?
Oh gosh, so many, so diverse. Relationships with friends and peers, things that are happening at home, possibly divorce, separation. They worry about money. They worry about how they look, how they feel, how they fit in. Sometimes they feel isolated. Sometimes it's just really around just being at school, the stresses of everyday life. It's a list as long as your arm.
And are those pressures greater than in the past, particularly with things like social media?
I would say there's been a sea change. So certainly I've been working with young people for 30 years. In the last 10 years, I would say, and particularly in schools and out in youth services and places where young people meet, I think we've seen a growing need to work with young people around issues to do with their well-being, because that's what's being presented. I think in the past, I think it's been there, but it's always been hidden. And I think there's a more of an open sort of playing field, really, a landscape where we all recognise and use terms and we're able to identify our feelings more. So there's been a change. There certainly has been a change alongside the digital age, if you like. I think people are very open about expressing what they feel, perhaps online, and it's a little bit harder in everyday life. So there's often a conflict there.
Well, yes, because you get these online trolls, and I can imagine if you're someone who is having a bit of a rough time at school, you don't get that boundary between home and school life anymore, do you? You can still be found, still be got at when you're outside of the school environment.
Yeah, it's absolutely constant. I mean, we have a sort of no mobile policy in school, apart from for using it, correctly, if you like. Not that to be used in lessons, but they do use them at break and lunchtime. So it's not a strict no mobile rule, because we're faced with the reality that people need those connections. They need to, contact home, etc. And for some young people, that's really, really important if they're feeling, not at their very best.
I guess the challenge that you have is that young people will come to you with problems that may be at the more minor end of the spectrum, but we're often told that the NHS's mental health services for young people only have the resources to intervene when things become very extreme. And so there must be a larger number of young people who aren't bad enough to be on those radars, but who still need some support.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly it. I mean, so a few of our young people will need specialist mental health services, and they will reach that threshold, if you like. But the more common everyday mental health problems and issues and challenges that young people face are often met with, in school and dealt with in school. We've got trained staff. We have a wellbeing room. We have a special educational needs team. We've got fantastic tutors that will look after the wellbeing of their particular tutor group. So it's a whole school approach. And we also work with outside agencies, in that bit before they need specialist sort of provision, if you like. So Service 6 will come in to do shorter term counselling here. the youth support services at Service 6 come in as well. And in fact, a plethora of organisations come in.
Well, listen, time's a bit against us for now, but we're going to be meeting some of the young people who you've worked with over the past couple of years, aren't we? So I'm keen to hear some of their stories. Joe, thank you for now. Joe Holmes, Wellbeing Lead School Counsellor at Rushton Academy, and Annabelle will be, as I say, morning Annabelle. Welcome back to Rushton Academy, where children at the school are wearing elements of yellow today to mark Mental Health Day. There are cake things going on as well. A kind of light-hearted side, so I guess trying to show solidarity and also for young people to have a chance to say, hey, I'm kind of open to having these conversations. So we're going to have some of those conversations this morning. We'll be meeting a few more people just before 9 o'clock. But for now, I'm joined by pupils at the school, Reese and Casey. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Reese to start with. I know, this is weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it is weird.
I guess the things that I was thinking about on the way over here today are I can imagine that young people are both more open to talking about mental health now, but at the same time, you have things that I never had when I was growing up, like social media, that put more pressure on you. And I was wondering how the two things balance out.
Well, for me, I don't really have that problem with social media because I tend to sort of keep it filtered, and it's one of those things where I can just say no, get rid of the message and leave it. So I don't have that problem apart from at school where it is you can't normally get away from it if they're there.
Can you tell me a bit about what you've gone through?
So I've been bullied throughout my whole school career. So in primary I was bullied for my height, weight, skin conditions and not being able to fit in with everyone else in social situations. And as that progressed into secondary school, I had the issue more where due to me having sort of being anxious about school, I never had a friend group within most of the sort of popular people in the school. So I always had the problem where I was kind of classed as a misfit.
And Casey, is that a kind of similar experience to you in terms of not necessarily feeling like you fit in?
Yeah, I don't normally hang out in my year at all, and I don't talk in lessons really unless answering questions.
And is that down to anxiety or shyness or what?
Not sure, I just don't really fit in with all the other people in my year and everything.
How do you feel about them? You just feel like they're different to you, or that you don't see things in the same way, perhaps?
Yeah. Question mark.
I mean, it's quite a hard one to answer, I suppose, isn't it? But I guess when you're younger and you're trying to find your place in the world, I guess school can feel like maybe a slightly difficult environment in which to try and do those things.
Yep.
Certainly for you.
Yeah.
Reese, when you have difficult times, are there people in the school that you can turn to?
Yeah, so we have the school counsellor who is a main sort of person you can talk to. It's like if she is available, she'll find any space of time she has possible to try and sort a problem. If not, we have a system where you can talk to your form tutors and then heads of year, and it can get sorted that way. Mm-hmm. Or you can go straight to members of staff you trust, and it still gets put through to someone who can sort it.
I mean, Casey, we spoke to your school counsellor Jo earlier on. What's she like? How do you feel about her?
She's kind, and what Reese said. Yeah, and she's there whenever you want to speak to her. If she's free, of course. Very busy.
Young people, I'm told, are better at talking about mental health nowadays, or at least I feel like maybe you guys are than I was when I was in my teens. Casey, do you feel like that's the case for you?
No, not really. I don't talk, really.
Do you feel like you are more able to be open about your feelings with someone like Miss Holmes than you would be with other people, though?
It depends on what it is.
What kinds of things?
No, I don't know. Can't remember. Just like stuff. Words.
Reese, do you think that young people have a harder time nowadays?
It depends sort of what it's about, because in some cases they have it easier because it's now more understood and it's actually known that it is mental health and not just you're not normal. It's something that can be recognised and dealt with. But at the same time, people might not necessarily speak about it because of stigma. So I've had it sort of before where I've been dealing with sort of depression and self-harm, and whenever I'd have a small thing like a little cut or a bruise, I've had people come up to me and asked if I've self-harmed again. So there are those sort of barriers with people who don't quite understand, and they use the stigma more than knowing the actual condition.
What are the ways that people should approach someone who they think might be going through that sort of thing then?
It's better to sort of not come out and just say it, but at the same time don't try and sort of beat around the bush, sort of try and speak to it as you're not questioning them, you're just generally trying to find out and help them. Mm-hmm. So instead of just trying to go straight to the problem, do you have this problem, it's, well, are you sort of experiencing any of this, and is there any way someone could help you, or do you know anyone that can help you?
And just as a final brief question, for parents who I think at times can really struggle to feel like they're finding out everything from their children, how should parents approach some of these challenges if they think a son or daughter might be struggling?
Well, with it, I've had experience with my mum where it has just been, if there is something wrong, she's asked just to sit and talk and just not have it sort of focused around it, so just have it so that is one of the conversational topics, while still having what you would normally have in a conversation, but just having that as a focus point.
It's an interesting point. Thank you both very much, Reese and Casey. Thanks for talking to me. And Annabelle, we'll speak to more people at Russian Academy before 9. Yeah, welcome back to Russian Academy, where Joe Holmes, the kind of the well-being lead, is just handing out the stuffed toys. They're lovely and cuddly, and I think probably a good way of distracting people and getting people to open up a little bit. We've come here to meet some young people, talk about growing up in a time when perhaps people are more open about mental health, but also there are very particular pressures on young people, particularly, I suppose, around social media. And so Amy and Adam, who I'm going to meet now, I guess, guys, it was probably worth just asking you for your take on social media to begin with, the sites that you use, and whether overall you think that they're a positive or a negative thing.
Well, personally, through Facebook and Twitter and that, I don't think they're really always the bad sites, and they can be quite helpful, but they can also be quite bad depending on, who you meet and that. But the main issue for me, or for others, is on PlayStation or Xbox, because when I play games, I meet quite a lot of people that have been affected by online bullying. Like, if they've done bad in a game, or they're just not very talkative, they get bullied a lot. And I myself try to help in any way I can, because I just can't stand to see people sad or upset. But if I can't help out, then that kind of affects me in a way, because I feel like I've not done my job. You
then feel pulled down by it as well. Amy, what about you?
I think there can be negatives and positives towards social media. With positives, for me, I've always found there's been a huge support network for mental health. Especially on Facebook, I'm in support groups towards mental health and specific issues, and I've made pen pals through it, and now I've got friends in Nottingham, Stoke, all different places. But there are negatives towards it, there are pro communities which are pro towards certain mental health issues, and I don't think that can be the best place. It's depending on whether you fall into it. So it can be a toxic place or it can be a positive place, just depending on how you use it.
It is part of the problem that frankly, parents probably don't have too great an understanding of it and just think it is in principle bad or good, instead of viewing it in the same way as anything else, which is it can be okay if it's used in the right way.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's an unknowing. I think parents are more scared that if it gets into the wrong hands, what could be the circumstances. If a child does get into the wrong network, I have known where cases they have died through it, which is, God forbid, that's the worst thing that could happen. But I think I wouldn't say it's parents not knowing what could be good or bad. I think it's kind of the unknown if it goes bad.
Adam, for your vulnerabilities and the things that you have to deal with, do you have a support network around you aside from the kind of things that you can get online?
I mean, not really a support network, I'd say, but whenever I really felt depressed, I'd usually go to Jo Holmes, because she helps me quite a bit, and I think she's doing a fantastic job in the school with helping students in need. And if she weren't here, I think a lot of people would still be upset and not know what to do. She's
the school's wellbeing lead, and she's just standing to your right. I think she appreciates what you're saying. And Amy, for you, you were telling me before we went on air, don't go into any detail you don't want to, but that things kind of changed for you quite suddenly.
Yeah, when I was younger, like in year 8, I'm now at year 12. I suffered a lot with panic attacks just out the blue, and they spiraled into a lot worse after like literally a diagnosis of cancer, which is horrible. But after that, things went downhill, and it was just crazy how quick your life can change with it, really.
I suppose when we were setting all of this up, one of the things that we were talking about was the fact that for young people, if you're at the kind of the early stages of something and that you've got, say, a relatively minor mental health issue, that it can be hard to access help outside of school. And that things almost have to reach a crisis point before the state will step in, and that in a way is part of the problem because we're not nipping things in the bud.
I totally agree with that at some points. I know people who've had just like, I wouldn't say basic anxiety because it's never basic, but like a more simple version of anxiety, just like on the line. And they've had help from places like CAMS, which is a child and adolescent mental health service. But even if it's just basic things like anxiety, it can pretty much say, look, I need help. You can go to your GP, you can go to your school nurse, and they can refer you to places like CAMS or eating disorder networks and things like that.
Adam, do you feel like you're able to kind of negotiate your teenage years and feel confident about who you are? Because it's difficult for anyone growing up and going through their teens, I suppose, to figure out their place in the world and their identity.
I mean, it's a bit of both, really. I do feel like I know who I am, but when I was younger and I first came to this country, it was a bit different because I grew up in Sweden for 10 years of my life, and I've been here for 5 years now, and yes, I understand things a lot better, but there are still things that feel weird to me, and when I was in Sweden, I didn't really use social media or anything, so everything just kind of blasted into me, and it was all new, and I was like, whoa.
I as with the piece earlier on, I'm keen to finish talking to you guys by asking what older people, essentially, who are listening to this, who have sons, daughters, grandchildren, and they may think to themselves, I really wish I could speak to them about something that I'm worried about, but I don't really know how to start that conversation. What advice can you give to people in that circumstance?
I would just say be open. If you're worried about them, either you think they might be self-harming or anything, just go up to them and say, look, I know you're struggling, or I have an idea that you're struggling. Is there any way I can help you? Because there's worse, you can pressure them and that can be, oh, that's the worst thing, and it can send a relapse. Or if you go into it a more gentle approach, being like, I'm here for you, I think that can be better because you're more likely for them to open up because you're being more gentle than harsh.
Mm-hmm. Adam, is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, I agree with Amy. I think you should be quite calm and relaxed when you go in to help. Not quite playful, but not serious either, because if you're serious, it can put someone off and they can get the wrong idea and they might get scared off of the whole thing. But if you're more calm and relaxed when you talk to them, they'll open up more and it feels more all right to talk to them.
Adam and Amy, thank you both very much for talking to me. And also to Reese and to Casey from earlier on. Annabelle, I'm going to stick around at Russian Academy and meet some more young people. We'll hear from later on in the day on Radio Northampton.